Je me souviens qu'avant qu'on ait le coloris, en fait, ce qu'on faisait, on mettait de la colle sur l'électron.
I'm talking about packing and covering. So the setup is the following. We have a group gamma acting as usual on a metric space, and I will define what is R packing. So an R packing of a ball is a set of the finite set of balls B I R of, I should say, disjoint balls, sorry, which are all included in the radius R, and you pick up inside this joint ball of radius small r, and what we will call pack X R R. It is the maximal cardinality of such a set. Okay, and I can also consider a covering. So here you know that it's completely independent on the group which I have fixed, and now I could ask my balls in the covering, in the packing, sorry, to be centered at the point of the orbit. Okay, so it is a second definition. So we will call gamma XR packing of XR is a finite necessarily finite if the group is actually proper, is a finite set of disjoint balls B of gamma I X R included in B R. Okay, so in the gamma X packing, I ask to the center of the balls to be on the orbit of X. Okay, and maybe the last definition. So we will call a gamma X R covering BXR to be a family B gamma I X R such that their union covers the orbit of gamma, the orbit of X by gamma in B of X capital R. Some question? Ah, okay, sorry. So contain the set of the orbit, the set of the orbit of X contained in gamma, and what we call the covering number of XR capital R is a minimal cardinality of such a set. Okay, so kind of obvious definition, some sense, and okay, so now there are very trivial properties which I will be going to list, and I let you as an exercise to prove them, but it's really completely obvious. So the property is the following. So we consider, we restrict now to the case where the group action has a finite codiameter. So diameter of X mod gamma is less than D. And we have the following property. So for all X in X, R positive R less than capital R, then there are three important properties. I take my notes because if I don't take them, I will write one thing. So this studies the relation between covering and packing numbers. Okay, so there are obvious relations. So first obvious relation is that this is less than packing gamma. So the covering number is bounded above by the packing number with R over 2 and capital R plus R small r over 2. Okay, and the second obvious relation is that the packing of XR capital R is less than, okay, so this one maybe I will explain. The ratio between the measure of the ball of radius R divided by the measure of the ball of radius small r, and this is less than mu x gamma of b bar of, it's not very important, okay. Let me just put it this way, it's less than the covering number of X R capital. Okay. And the third property says that the packing number, so gamma packing number X R capital R is less, of course, than the packing number of X R R, because I just take point of the orbit here, so it's certainly less. And right, and again, I can come back to the packing number, the gamma packing number, changing a little bit the constant here. Right, so of course, the last inequality here holds true only when R, small r, is larger than the diameter. Okay? So when R is larger than the diameter. Okay? So these are completely straightforward properties. So maybe so this one, for example, comes from the fact that when you look at the packing, so you look at a family of disjoint balls in BXR, and then the measure of the large ball is certainly larger than the measure of this disjoint union of balls of this packing, and then it's certainly larger than the maximum number times the volume of each of these balls, which are the same because they are centered at the point of the orbit. Okay, so this relation is trivial, and everything is of the same kind. So it's just look at it and do the exercise by yourself.
Question on the chat. Definition 3.
Yeah.
To cover the intersection of the ball and the gamma X, or only cover the ball?
here in the definition. It contains the
Only the intersection with
the intersection with the gamma. Okay? You could ask anytime. It's the definition we need. Okay. All right. So let me just now state an easy corollary following this relation. So this is a Bishop-Gromov inequality for subgroup, which will be important. For what follows. And so what is the setup? So we have XD delta hyperbolic. And our usual assumption, meaning that the diameter of gamma is less than T, the entropy of X D is less than H. And now I take gamma prime, a subgroup, any subgroup of gamma, and I claim that okay, so I claim that then so the Bishop-Gromov quotient for gamma prime of dx r divided by mu x gamma prime of dx small r right? So it is smaller than mu x gamma. So here is the subgroup, sorry, here is the subgroup, and here is the full group. And here one has dx capital R plus R over 2 divided by mu x gamma of dx R over 2. Okay? So the point in this inequality is that so I'm sorry. So this statement is independent of this assumption. But what I want to say now is that when one has this assumption and when R is not too small, then one can apply the Bishop-Gromov inequality for the full group gamma and to deduce the Bishop inequality for the subgroup. Okay? So now maybe I add some assumption. Then for all, let's say R over 2, I mean R larger than 20 d plus 2 delta and smaller than R, then one can apply Bishop-Gromov inequality for this ball, because for this quotient, because R over 2 is larger than 10 d over 2 delta plus 2 delta, and this is the range of application of our Bishop-Gromov. And here one had some function, explicit function, depending on delta G and H, which I don't want to rewrite, but you know what it is. Okay. So in fact, the main point is that it depends on maybe I write it down because it's easier, because it depends also on R. So it's 3 R plus R over 2 to the 25 over 4 divided by R times E 6H R plus R over 2. So this was the Bishop-Gromov inequality that we have shown in the first lecture. And so it transferred to subgroup. And this property that Bishop-Gromov in large group transfer to the subgroup is important. So there is just one thing to prove here, which is this inequality, which doesn't depend on those assumptions, but just in the the definition so we will need just the properties, so maybe you can always here.
Before you erase, there is another question.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you say a few words on inequality tree? It's similar to your plus.
Yeah, inequality tree is just so you start with a packing small r, capital R packing. So you have points all around, which are the center of the disjoint ball. And since you know that gamma has a codiameter D, then close to each xi, you can find a gamma I of x. And therefore, you get another covering of radius center at point of the orbit of radius r minus gamma. Just saying that xi is not far from some point of the orbit, not far being a distance less than z. Okay.
So this ball contains another ball.
Sorry.
So this ball contains another ball centered at.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it's
No, the inequality shouldn't be reversed. The question.
The reverse. Which one? This one? I think no, you start with the packing here. Sorry, maybe I missed. Okay, next of this. So you start with the packing of this type, okay, and you yeah.
What I was saying, so you take a ball of radius small r
Around xi.
centered anywhere,
Yeah.
will contain a ball of radius r
Yeah,
minus
that's
d
okay.
centered at
That's
the
exactly. So
orbit
this
point.
ball of radius r, thank you. So this ball of radius r. So I have a certain, okay, I take one ball of this packing here, centered at some point xi and of radius r, and at distance d less than d, there is a point in the orbit, and now the claim is that in that ball, the ball center that gamma I of x and of radius r minus d is contained in this first ball. Okay, and then from a packing with every kind of points, you come up with a packing with point centered in the orbit of x, and since the packing number is the maximum number, you get this inequality. Does it answer? No?
Yes, thank you.
It's okay. Okay, you have to sit down and to accept okay, so maybe I do the proof of this inequality just using these properties. So the proof of this inequality here. Okay, so if I start with this ratio, this Bishop-Gromov quotient, and I look at my formulas here, and I come up with less than covering with respect to gamma prime of x r capital R. Okay, and now this is less than from the first relation. This is bounded above by the packing number with different radius. So we come up with packing number always with respect to gamma prime of x and I should say R over 2, R plus R over 2. Okay. And since gamma prime is a subgroup of gamma, this is less than the packing number with respect to gamma, x R over 2, R plus R over 2. Okay. And now I use this inequality to get what I wanted. Okay. Okay. So it's a bit surprising that this Bishop-Gromov for group transfer to subgroup, that it's, I mean, it's not.
So we agree that in the property 2, what you wrote as a big R is a gamma. And because your gamma is
Say it again. Where are you?
here,
Yeah. Here.
No, right.
Here.
Bottom. Yeah. Not this one.
So
It's gamma.
Index is
Because your small gamma looks like.
Yeah. Sorry.
R, and so
Yeah,
by
sorry. Gamma.
and so the big is small r big.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now, this Bishop-Gromov for subgroup will be useful in a moment. And now I will change a little bit of subject, and I will speak in the first part of this course, after this one. I will speak about a theorem of Green-Breuillard-Tao, which will be using as a black box. So, but I want to explain you well what this theorem of Breuillard-Green-Tao means. Okay, I'm not able to explain you the proof, and we will use it. Okay, in what we are going to say. So, okay, so before stating the Breuillard-Green-Tao theorem, I have to make some preliminaries to just take you into this kind of problem. So I will speak a little about growth of groups. Okay, so the setup is a group gamma with a finite generating set. Okay, and so Gérard explained in the first lecture of Philippe what is a Kelly-graph of gamma with respect to S. So I just draw the picture again. So here is the new, so the vertices of gamma are the element of the group, and the edges between two elements correspond to the fact that these two elements differs by one generator. So starting from E, one has, so if S is equal to S1, blah, 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 SK, for example, then you have S1, S1, S2, etc. Okay. So for example, next you have S1, S2, etc. So in between two elements, there is just one generator, and that's it. Okay. So gamma is a finite system of generator, give rise to a graph, and on this graph there is a distance. I think Gérard will explain what it is. And the distance between gamma and gamma prime is just the length with respect to the generating set S of gamma prime minus 1 gamma, where LS of any element is just the smallest number of generators I need to write gamma. Okay? So this is the smallest cardinality of generators, smallest numbers of generators, such that gamma equal Si1, Sik. Okay. Right, so with this definition, gamma is acting isometrically on its Kerr graph. And okay, so therefore the graph is the Kerr graph is some kind of space X that we were talking about. We have a group that acts on some metric space, and so maybe a definition. So gamma S as polynomial growth. So I should say gamma, a group, a finitely generated group, as polynomial group. So gamma is finitely generated. Fg as polynomial group. If for one, and then equivalently for any generating set S, then what I call Vs of k, which is by definition the number of elements of the group in a ball of radius k with respect to this distance. So it is the cardinality of the set of elements gamma, such that Ls of gamma, which is the distance between E and gamma, is less than k. So it measures the group, the volume, the measure of a ball. If one consider as a measure what I have called mu x gamma before. Okay? So if this function is less than some polynomial p depending on s of k. Okay? So a group as polynomial group if you can find one generating set such that the cardinality of a ball of radius k is bounded above by some polynomial in k, and this definition. I mean, if for some system of generator you have some polynomial group, then it's the same for all. Just do it, and it's really exercise. Okay, so this definition is independent on the set of generators you are considering, and the second definition is if gamma has exponential growth, if for one, and then any finite set of generator, then Vsk is larger than e to some constant depending on s times k, for some constant, or some positive constant. So, of course. So again, it doesn't depend on so here there is something to show. It doesn't depend on the chosen system of generator, but it's a definition. So example of such group everybody knows. So example of group of polynomial group. Zn, Heisenberg group, nilpotent group. Of polynomial growth. The exponential side the free group on n generators, every fundamental group of a manifold, of a closed manifold with negative curvature. Have exponential growth. These are typical examples that everybody knows. And okay, so now I would like to make some observation. Right, so it's an observation and an exercise, but maybe we will do it together. Observation. So the observation is that if you take a group of polynomial growth, so if gamma has polynomial growth, then there exists a positive number and there exists a sequence of integer tending to plus infinity such that the balls of such that Vs Kn, sorry, Vs2 Kn divided by Vs Kn. So it's a kind of Bishop-Gromov quotient. Okay, so it's a measure of the ball of radius 2Kn divided by the measure of the ball of radius Kn. It's smaller than C. Okay, so this kind of property can be just phrased with just the same thing as saying that gamma is C doubling at scales Kn for the sequence of Kn tending to infinity. Okay, so it's just, just this property, we call it to be doubling, meaning that the ball of radius 2 r divided by the measure of the ball of radius r is bounded by some c. So this property is called C doubling, and the scale is the radius at which it's all true. Okay. And this is an exercise. This is an easy exercise actually. And in fact, so maybe I let you do it. Okay. So proof. Exercise. So hint by contradiction. The hint continue here. Assume that for all C larger than 1, there exists, let's say, n, such that for any n larger than n, then Vs of 2n divided by Vs of n is larger than C. Okay, and it's not difficult to deduce from that. Taking maybe I do it because I. Okay. So take now. So from this you deduce that Vs of 2Kn divided by Vs of n is larger than C to the K. Okay. And from there, it's not difficult to show that Vs of x is larger than, so I don't remember the constant, but you just compute it. Vs of n times x to the power log of C divided by log of 2. Okay? So this means that this property is not true, then the growth of the group is larger than, so since C is arbitrary, it's larger than any polynomial. So it's not a polynomial. Okay, so this is just complete the argument if you wish. So this observation is a starting point of the proof of the famous theorem of Gromov, which says that if a group has a polynomial growth, then it is virtually nilpotent. And this is this theorem that Breuillard, Green-Tao, in some sense, generalized. That's why I've been talking about this. So this observation is the starting point of the theorem of Gromov, which says that if gamma has polynomial growth, then gamma is virtually nilpotent, which means that there exists a finite index subgroup gamma prime of gamma such that gamma prime is nilpotent. So we have to, okay, so we have seen, we have just said that nilpotent groups have polynomial growth, and this theorem of Gromov tells you the converse. So every group having polynomial growth is virtually nilpotent. Okay. In fact, what one proves in this, what Gromov proves in this theorem, is that any group which has this property of which is C doubling for some C for a sequence of state tending to infinity, then the group is virtually nilpotent. This is a very starting point of the proof. Of course, the proof is much more elaborated. Okay? And now I can answer questions so far. So now I can state the this theorem of Breuillard and Tao. Which says the following. So it says that for any, so I write it down and then I comment that I'm going to write. So maybe it will seem to you a bit weird, but we'll see that it's not. So for any P, there exists N of P such that the following so for any group G, for any finitely generated, okay, for any group, for any finitely generated group G, I'm going to see. Okay. So for any group G, any generating set S, if there exists a subset A in G such that two things hold together. So the first thing is that S. So I will explain what I'm going to write here. SNP is, so this is the ball of radius n of p. So it's contained in A. And the second property is that the cardinality of the product of A by A divided by the cardinality of A is less than P. Then the group G is virtually nilpotent. Okay, so maybe I should make some comment about this. So this property tells you that, you see, so think, so SNP, I should have said SNP is the ball of radius NP. Okay, so think for a while that A coincides with SNP, okay, and this property here, so A times A, maybe I should also mention this, is a set of G times G prime for G and G prime in A. Okay, and if, for example, A coincides with S and P, then you can, roughly speaking, consider that A times A is S, I think it's contained in S2 and P because of the triangle inequality. So if you multiply two elements which moves the identity to less than NP, then the product of two by triangle inequality will move identity to less than 2 NP. And so this quantity, you can think of it as saying that G, G is P doubling. I keep this formulation here. It's P doubling at scale n of P. So n of P is a number which is very large. Okay, so these properties all together, you can think of them as saying that G is P doubling at a certain scale NP. And the conclusion is that the group is virtually nilpotent. So here, one was saying that if a group gamma is C doubling for a sequence of scale tending to infinity, then the group is virtually nilpotent. Here, we say that if the group is P doubling for one single P, so sorry, for one single scale, so it's P doubling for one scale NP, very large depending on P, but just one, then the same conclusion holds. Okay, so it can be seen as a strong reinforcement of the Gromov theorem. Okay, but let me just say it again. So if G is just P doubling at one single scale, which is n depending on P, then the group is virtually nilpotent. So it's really in the same mood as Gromov theorem, but with this reinforcement here, which is that we don't need to consider a sequence of states. Are there questions so far about this statement? It's very important to understand this now. So now we can use this theorem and our Bishop-Bromfield inequality. So the goal now is to deduce from our Bishop-Bromfield inequality and this theorem a kind of Margulis lemma. So, what does it say exactly? So maybe I can remind you what the Margulis lemma says. So we start with the general setting. Say gamma is, as usual, a group acting on XD, as usual, properly discontinuously. And I pick up some point X in X and some number R positive, some radius, and some number. And I will consider different sets. So the first set is the set sigma R of X, being simply the set of gamma in gamma, which moves X at distance less than R. Okay. So make a picture after. And now I define gamma R of X to be the group generated by these elements. Okay. Right, so just a picture to illustrate what I'm saying. So, for example, take gamma equals the P1 of a surface of genus G. The surface is not M2, a surface of genus G. So here is your surface, which is covered by the disk. And take a point here, X, which projects down to, say, M, and saying that looking at element of the group which moves X at distance less than R gives rise as a quotient to say geodesic loop of length less than R. Okay, so to speak, gamma R in this example, gamma R of X is a subgroup of pi1 of M pointed at X generated by loops of length less than R. Okay. So these are the groups which I am interested in. Okay, and the idea now is that the lemma of Margulis states that under certain geometric assumption, then there exists some universal constant such that for every R smaller than this universal constant, then such a group are virtually nilpotent. And because of this picture, and because we know in certain situations what are the virtually nilpotent group, we will come up with geometric information on the quotient space I am considering. So this is what I'm going to say now. So just to start with, I recall you the classical Margulis theorem. One theorem of Margulis. So it says that there exists a constant, positive constant, such that for any Riemannian manifold, let's say for any Cartan Adama manifold, which means simply connected and of sectional curvature. Let's say in my situation here, I will. So this is Cartan-Adama, and now I will assume that the sectional curvature is bounded, is non-positive and bounded below by some positive number. Then, for any discrete group acting properly discontinuously, so for any proper action, then for any R smaller than positive R smaller than this constant, then the group gamma R of X is virtually important. And the important thing here, one important thing in this statement, is that this constant here doesn't depend on the situation you are considering. You have some universal constant depending on the dimension. So N is the dimension, and A is the lower bound of the sectional curvature. Then, for any discrete group action on this manifold, group generated by element which moves slowly some point are virtually important. Okay, so this is this kind of result I would like to formulate now in our context of metric spaces, which are just like delta hyperbolic. So this theorem has been widely generalized. So it's not the optimal version. There are many other versions, but I don't want to speak of it. I just take this theorem because it is close to the one I'm going to do now. So the main theorem of today is the following. So for any, so it's a kind of analog of this one. For any positive delta H and D, our most favorite invariant, there exists some epsilon 0 depending on this parameter, positive constant, so this constant here, epsilon is a Margulis constant. It's a kind of Margulis constant. I will call it Margulis constant, and such that for any action, as usual, such that the diameter X mod gamma is less than D, the entropy of XD is less than H, and for any X in X, then gamma R of X is virtually cyclic. So I have replaced here cyclic by sorry, nilpotent by cyclic, because in this context, nilpotent group will be cyclic, so it's not very important. I will come back to this later. Okay, so let me sketch the proof of this theorem. Okay, so the proof more or less goes as follows. So, so let me call G. So I will apply, of course, the Breuer-Green-Tao theorem. So I will call G. G will be my group generated by yeah, will be. So I did not my group gamma R of xg, just to glue to the Breuer-Green-Tao theorem. And so it's a group generated by element moving slightly the point x. And I will set I reuse that sigma, I will call it S, just to also to get close to the notation in Breuer-Green-Tao theorem. So S is sigma R of x, is the set of gamma, so the distance between x and gamma x is less than R. Okay, and I want to apply the Breuer-Green-Tao. And so I will start with some subset A of G, which I define to be the subset of element G in G, such that the distance between x and Gx is less than some constant R0, okay, which I will be choosing in a moment. Okay, so if I consider the product A times A, it is certainly contained in the set of G, such that the distance between x and Gx is smaller than 2R0, just by triangle inequality. And therefore, so I claim that we are going to apply Breuer-Green-Tao theorem to such a set with an R0 that I have to choose. Okay, and of course, for R sufficiently small. So we have two parameters in this proof. I have to choose R small enough, so there is some constant epsilon 0 that I have to give to you. Okay, and R0, which will be defined the set A. Okay, so now I'm looking at the. So I raise this Breuer-Green-Tao theorem. So in the assumption I have to check, I look at the cardinality of A times A divided by the cardinality of A. And so this is exactly mu x G, the counting measure for the group G of the ball centered at X and of radius 2R0. I mean, 2R0. So it's not equal, but it's less because of this inclusion, okay, divided by mu x G of B x R0. Okay. And this is by our Bishop-Gromov inequality. So now in order to apply Bishop-Gromov, I will choose R0 to be larger than, for example, to be equal to 10 d plus 2 delta. So from now on, I pick up R0 to be equal to 10 d plus 2 delta, or maybe I have to be secure, so I put 20. You will see why in 1 second. Okay. It's not important. So in order to use Bishop-Gromov inequality theorem, I need that the denominator correspond to a radius which is large enough. So maybe I first apply the Bishop-Gromov for subgroup that I have just stated at the beginning of this course of today, and I said that this is less than mu x gamma of B x. So I don't remember exactly. Right. So 2R0 plus R0 over 2 divided by mu x gamma. So we have changed here. Here there were G And now, because of this Bishop inequality for subgroup, I can replace G by gamma, but changing a little bit the radius. And I come up with this inequality. Okay, and now if you have chosen R0 to be 20 D plus 2 delta, then this is 10 D plus 2 delta. And then you can apply our Bishop-Gromov inequality because gamma satisfies all the good assumptions, compact quotient, and blah, 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 blah. And therefore, this is certainly smaller than some P depending on delta H and D. Okay, by Bishop-Gromov inequality. Okay. So now this, so we come up with this first assumption for this set A. So this set A is doubling, is P doubling for P depending on the geometric quantity I have fixed at the beginning. So this P of rise by Breuer-Green-Tao theorem to n of P, which unfortunately is not explicit, but it gives you some other number n of P. Okay, and I want to check that S n of P is contained in A. Okay, but S and P is contained in the set of, so S, I recall that S is just sigma R of X, and P means that it is this set is contained in the set of gamma in G, such that it's G in G, such that the distance between X and Gx is smaller than R times n of P just by triangle inequality. Okay? So this set is exactly, by definition of S, the element of S are just the element of sigma R of S. So they move X as distance less than R. And if I can take product of NP element, then I come up with that. Okay. And I would like, in order to satisfy the assumption of the theorem of Breuer-Green-Tao, I would like to know that this set is contained in A. Okay? And A is by definition the set of G, such that the distance between X and Gx is less than R0. Okay? So I want to choose n of P to be smaller than R0. And then I come up with my epsilon 0, Margulis constant. So which means that R has to be smaller than R0 divided by n of P. So I remind you that this number is completely fixed now. R0 is just 20D plus 2 delta. So P is something which is given by our Bishop-Gromov inequality, and n of P is something which is given by the Breuer-Green-Tao theorem. And then I just will put epsilon 0 to be this constant. Okay? And if I go back now on all what I have said, then, okay, so I have a group G, which is gamma R of X, okay? And I have associated to G, a subset A, okay, which was defined this way. And I have shown that for a specific choice of R, then the group G satisfies the assumption of Breuer-Green-Tao theorem, and then G is virtually nilpotent. Which is what I wanted to prove. Okay. So it's okay. So are there questions so far? So it's not really difficult. I mean, it's just juxtaposition of one deep theorem, which is this Breuer-Green-Taub theorem, and this Bishop-Gromov inequality. And you come up with a statement which is very analogous to this original Margolin theorem, but in the context of metric space with which are no more manifolds, just delta hyperbolic with bound on entropy. And so there are no lower bound on curvature, just an upper bound on the entropy. And here we have the diameter entering.
So the condition on R is missing.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you.
It's written on the left.
It's written.
On the left.
On the same.
Yeah, it is the analog assumption to this one. Yeah, thank you very much. No further remark or comments?
Have
So-
the same conclusion. They're very cyclic.
Right. So okay. So right. So you're right. So there is some. So the proofs gives you that the group is virtually nilpotent, but it is so there is some remark that has to be done here that in the so for if gamma acts on a delta hyperbolic space, if gamma acts properly on the delta hyperbolic space is compact quotient, then well, I have not used what are the isometry of Gromov hyperbolic space. And so the picture is the following. So there are, so if you know well the isometry of the hyperbolic space, for example, the Poincaré disk, and there are three types of isometries. There are, so here X is the hyperbolic two-plane, H2, which I represent as a disk. And isometries are either hyperbolic, meaning that there are two fixed points on the boundary. So gamma plus and minus belong to the boundary of X. Okay, and the axe here is fixed, and the isometry moves along the axe at a minimal distance, so which means that all other points are moved at larger distance of each other than on this axis. Okay, so there are hyperbolic elements, okay, and there are elliptic elements, which means that gamma fixes the point, and there are parabolic elements, which means that gamma fixes a single gamma plus equals gamma minus on the boundary. Okay, and the point here is the fact that when there is a compact quotient, this kind of element disappears. There are just this kind of element, and there is a lemma which amounts to saying that virtually nilpotent group are virtually cyclic. The reason is that a nilpotent group has a non-trivial center. So there is an element inside, and if this element, so forget about elliptic case, if this element is elliptic, is hyperbolic, sorry, so it has two fixed points at infinity. Therefore, all elements of the group up to finite index are commuting, and then they are fixing those 2 points at infinity. And then the group you come up with is a subgroup of the full group of isometry preserving these 2 points, which is cyclic. Okay? So it's more or less what happens. So this, so So this is cyclic and non-nilpotent because in this situation, nilpotent subgroup are cyclic. There is no deep thing about it. Okay, so I like the question.
What happens if your ray is not compact but has finite volume?
So in this statement, we have not really defined. So x could be so you have to define volume. So maybe maybe you could put the Hausdorff measure associated to D or something like that. But so we have not looked at the case where it is. So in this case, the Margulis lemma. So first, the Margulis lemma doesn't need any assumption on the quotient. It is just a statement which holds for every group. Okay, and maybe the question is motivated by the fact that this theorem or this one we will see has implication on the topology of the Fick decomposition of the manifold. And in this setting, of course, the finite volume case is comprised in the statement, but not here. We need compact. Okay. It doesn't mean that it might not be true in the finite volume case. So we have to define what is precisely in what setting you are talking about, which kind of space you need a volume. So it's not that. Okay, you could define a gamma invariant volume on X, for example, the Hausdorff measure of D, and try to figure out. But we really need a bounded diameter. So, but it's a good question. You could ask for generalizing this certainly. Okay. So maybe okay, so I would like now to speak about the geometric application of this theorem. Okay, so a few definition. So as before, gamma is a group acting in the space, and I consider some point in X, and I will define the systole, the gamma systole at X to be the int of the distance between X and gamma X for gamma belonging to gamma minus identity. Okay. This is the definition. And I will also define for some positive number R, I will define X R, which will be the R in part of X. I will make a picture right now. This is by definition the set of X such that the system is less than. Okay, so picture. So for example, you take an hyperbolic surface like this, and it has here, for example, a small geodesic of length smaller than r. Okay, and this closed geodesic corresponds to some hyperbolic element gamma, which moves if m is this point and x is any lift of this point m. This geodesic lift to an axis here, and gamma x is here, and this is displacement, it's smaller than r. So these two lengths here and here are equal. Okay, and if I look now at xr, so it will certainly contain. So assume that this geodesic is much smaller than r, and so this will mean that nearby this axis, where the displacement is smaller than r, then here in the neighborhood of this axis there is a subset where all points are moved at distance less than r, just by continuity something. And in fact, this picture will be reproduced by just taking the orbit. The orbit of this domain by the whole group of the surface gamma. So here one has x, and here one has x mod gamma, and here it's the orbit of this domain by gamma. So gamma is acting over there, and this domain has such an orbit. So it's I just draw finitely many pieces, but you have infinitely many pieces which accumulate all over the boundary. And okay, so you have to keep this picture in mind in order to understand what is going on now. So basically, what I'm going to say is that in this more general context, we will be able to draw the same picture somehow. Okay? So in the classical setting, this is a consequence of Margulis theorem because the sin part is associated to some virtually nilpotent then virtually cyclic subgroup. Which are these subgroup? So the fin part over there are associated to cyclic subgroup, and maybe I should add some remark, which is that this red, so XR, the sin part has been defined on X, okay? And usually people define the fin part downstairs on the manifold. So if you look at the projection of this fin part of X downstairs, it will be a neighborhood of this small geodesic here, okay? So here it's pi of XR. So you could have defined the sin part of the quotient just taking the projection of this, what I have defined to be XR, okay? And the power of the Margulis lemma is that from an algebraic observation on the nature of the group which move a little, you come up with a geometric description of neighborhood of points where which have small loops. Okay, so this is the idea of. Okay, so now I can maybe state. I'm not sure that I will have time to, but I can at least state the proposition, one proposition, which is somehow what I've said here, but in our context. So it's so the proposition is the following. So it will lead to this picture. So XD is as usual. So so it's delta hyperbolic. Gamma is some group acting on it, and usual assumption diameter is bounded, and the entropy is bounded above. And I take R, any number smaller than my Margulis constant. Of the previous theorem. Okay, and assume gamma is non-elementary. So I have to explain what it means in a while. So the conclusion is that there are two things. For any x in the thin part, so I recognize that x is somewhere in x, upstairs, so to speak. Then there exists a maximal virtually cyclic subgroup G of x, gamma, containing sigma r of x, and so in fact the picture is the following. So one has sigma r of x, gamma r of x, which is contained in G of x. And okay, and furthermore, the map which to x associates this maximal virtually cyclic group G of x is locally constant. And secondly, there are two things, and the second part is that if in the case where the thin part is non-empty, then R is non-connected. Okay. So so first of all, first remark, I didn't do a break today, and just remain 5 minutes. So maybe I won't do the proof now. I will postpone it to the next time. But I make just maybe you can prove it by yourself. I make just a comment about it. So the first part of the statement is the following. So you have a point here which is moved by some virtually cyclic group gamma r of x, and okay, so you can see that. I mean, you can intuitively see that when you move a little bit x, the group cannot be changing so much, just because in fact this group is defined as a group which so you take one element in the group associated to in sigma r of x. So let's assume that it is hyperbolic. So it has two fixed points at infinity and at the boundary at infinity. And what is G of x? G of x is just the set of all elements of gamma which fixes those 2 points. And then you see that when you move a little bit, those 2 points cannot move, so to speak. So you have to make a proof which is more precise, but it is globally the idea. Okay, so I will do the proof of that next time. And the main consequence of this proposition will be, maybe I can set it or tell it just now. So we'll say that under this assumption, if you look at the quotient, so this object here, so some space like this, then what you see on the picture holds true, meaning that Okay, there are thin parts, but there are also thick parts. The thick part is not empty, and the statement will be that for any such situation, then there exists a point where the systole is large, which corresponds to such a point. Okay, and which means that at the quotient there is one point where the, so to speak, the injectivity radius is large if you were talking a manifold, and here it's just where the so is projection of points which are displaced far away. This will be the foot into the door to get into the finiteness theorem. Thank you. Other question?